Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dwayne Brown. San Diego voters will decide whether to give a raise to minimum wage workers today. City Council decided to put the matter onto the 2016 ballot. KPBS reporter Claire Trageser is in the newsroom with more on the decision. All right, Claire, remind us how we got here. Did Council originally want this to go to vote?
No, the City Council originally passed the minimum wage increase without it going to a public vote, but opponents gathered enough signatures to force the council to decide whether to repeal the increase or put it on the ballot. So today the council decided to put it on the ballot.
And the original plan had workers getting raises in January. What happens now?
It means minimum wage workers won't get a raise this January. They are scheduled to get a raise to $10 an hour in January 2016 under state law. Then, if San Diego voters approve the increase in 2016, voters here will see their wages rise to $11.50 an hour.
Any sense of whether voters will actually pass the increase?
It's probably too early to say, but one thing on proponent side is that the increase will be on the June 2016 ballot. That's the next scheduled election in San Diego. It's also the presidential primary when more Democrats who might be more likely to vote for an increase will turn out.
KPBS reporter Claire Trageser. Tonight, Council will also consider mandatory water restrictions. They include limits on watering your yard and garden and on washing your car. The city's been under voluntary restrictions for several months. District Attorney says there isn't enough evidence to file charges in a break-in at Carl DeMaio's campaign headquarters. The Republican congressional candidate accused a former staffer in the incident earlier this year. The staffer then accused DeMaio of sexually harassing him. DA Bonnie Dumanis says there isn't sufficient evidence for either case. DeMaio says his campaign playbook was stolen and given to his opponent, Scott Peters. Peters says his campaign staff turned it over to police. We will have more on this bitter race later on Evening Edition. So far, no San Diego State students have tested positive for meningitis. Sarah Stelzer was taken off life support Saturday, and 5 other people were given new life because she was a registered organ donor. About 1,000 San Diego State University students have been seen or counseled by the Health Services Department since Sarah Stelzer was admitted to the hospital last week with flu-like symptoms. But it turned out to be something far worse.
There are 2 basic types of meningitis. One is caused by a virus and one is caused by a bacteria. The bacterial form can rapidly be fatal, and this is what they think she had.
Dr. Barry Brown is a transplant surgeon at Sharp Memorial Hospital. Although he wasn't involved with the Stelzer case, he did explain why the university was able to report she died on Friday after the family decided to donate her organs.
Some people are on life support, but they're actually dead, and those are the people who go on to become organ donors. There are some people who are on life support and their brain is still working a little bit. Those people are not dead.
Sharp uses a lot of tissue donation because of all the people coming back from war in Afghanistan and Iraq. They benefit greatly from people who donate, as well as people who are on dialysis who need kidneys. Dr. Brown says there's still no foolproof way to determine if an organ is okay to transplant, but it's what they have to do to keep people alive.
Until we can grow our own kidneys and hearts, that's just one of the inherent risks of transplant.
Robert Billings lost his wife Jackie to bacterial meningitis earlier this year. He donated her organs and believes the benefits outweigh the risks.
And so she was able to positively affect 3 people's lives with 4 different organs.
Sarah Stelzer's mom says out of tragedy comes something new. A single organ donor can save the lives of up to 8 people, while a tissue donor can improve the lives of up to 50. To learn more, visit donatelifecalifornia.org. There's an ongoing mystery at a Coronado nursing home about the identity of a man who's lived there on life support for more than a decade. He's only known as John Doe. Our media partner, iNewsSource, first told us about him earlier this month. Reporter Joanne Farian joins us now with an update on the case. Joanne, what do we know about John Doe?
Well, he's lived on a life support unit at the Villa Coronado Skilled Nursing Facility for 14 years. He's on a unit where most people are unable to walk or talk. Almost all of them have breathing and feeding tubes. No one knows this man's identity, where he's from, his age. The nursing home will only tell us he came to live at the facility 14 years ago after being transferred from the ICU at the UCSD Medical Center. A couple months ago, a woman living in Texas saw an old news story on YouTube about a young man who was in a car accident near the U.S.-Mexican border. The man was severely brain injured and couldn't walk or talk. She traced him to Villa Coronado and asked the nursing home to compare her brother's fingerprints with John Doe's.
And did they do the comparison?
Well, yes, they did. The nursing home compared the prints from an old Mexican military ID the woman in Texas provided, but the results were inconclusive. The attorney for the nursing home said there wasn't enough detail in the fingerprints provided.
So what happens next?
Well, if in fact John Doe is the missing brother, that means he's a Mexican citizen. So the Mexican consulate in San Diego is now helping to facilitate a DNA test. The last I spoke with officials, the test hadn't been conducted yet. Of course, we'll bring you the latest once we have those results.
iNews Source reporter Joanne Ferry, and you can find more of her reporting about California's subacute nursing homes online at impossiblechoice.org. Proposition 47 would reduce some nonviolent felonies to misdemeanors. Retired San Diego Police Chief William Lansdowne is co-author of the measure, but as Peggy Pico tells us, not everyone in law enforcement supports 47.
Retired San Diego Police Chief William Lansdowne and San Diego Chief Deputy District Attorney David Greenberg. Welcome to Evening Edition.
Good to see you, Peggy.
Hello. Good to see you. Now, Chief Lansdowne, you co-authored this proposition with San Francisco District Attorney George Gascon to reduce penalties for non-violent crimes, felons specifically, to misdemeanors. What kind of crimes are we talking about?
What we're talking about is petty theft, it's personal possession of small amounts of drugs, it's writing a bad check, all under $950. It's embezzlement of writing false checks, some ID theft. It's really treating misdemeanors for what they are.
But right now, some of those are felons, like the check writing. Those in favor of felonies, I should say, those in favor of Prop 47 say that it'll actually improve public safety and it'll save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. How so?
Well, I can tell you the prison system's broken. The federal government had to come in and do realignment because public safety couldn't fix it. It clearly is going to reduce the numbers of people in prison. There's about 10,000 that are in their last 3 years that it would affect. And the money saved, anywhere from $100 million to $250 million a year, goes into three things. One is mental health and drug prevention. That's 65%. 25% goes to school, to keep kids in school. If kids graduate from school, their propensity to be involved in crime is lessened considerably, or 10% of it goes to victims of crime.
So that's the public safety aspect that's addressing that spending on that, because it seems counterintuitive to say that, hey, we're going to reduce these felonies to misdemeanors, but it's going to improve public safety.
Well, they're still get sanctions. They still go to local jails, and the studies clearly show that in the local jails they get far better service. 50% of the people in prison today are suffering from mental illness. It starts to address that before they get to prison.
Well, let me ask you this, David. Do you agree with that assessment as far as public safety and also the spending? Will it save money?
I don't agree with it. I don't think currently all of those theft offenses, if they're $950 or below, we prosecute them as misdemeanors if the person has no criminal history. So what happens is it's taking away the flexibility of people that are repeat offenders that do this crime again and again and again, or have a serious criminal history of, say, robberies or residential burglaries, and treating them as more serious felons. In terms of saving money, because of realignment, which was passed by the legislature in October of 2011, most of the offenders committing these offenses are not in state prison. They're in local jail already. The ones that aren't in local jail for those offenses have a prior strike offense. So that's the only way people committing those types of offenses can get to prison now. So the savings to the state isn't going to be as much, and the initiative itself talks about the Department of Finance determining the savings to the state, not the savings to local jurisdictions.
And you have expressed some other unintended consequences. What do you mean by that?
Well, in terms of other unintended consequences, what's going to happen is people will be released, obviously, from prison that are violent and dangerous folks that would have stayed there. The standard of dangerousness is, do they have prior convictions for offenses that are that don't happen that often, and they're either in prison, such as they received a sentence for a murder, or a present commitment for a life term, or possessed a weapon of mass destruction.
So it sounds like it's exclusive with you. Now, Chief Lansdowne, you mentioned about dedicating money to mental health services and K through 12 programs. Don't we already have programs like that already in place?
We have some programs, but it's not a lot. I look a lot at different programs within the court system to deal with drugs. Currently here in San Diego County, the number I looked at is, since in the last 17 years, they've treated 3,000 people for drug court. There are 23,000 charges a year in San Diego County for drugs. It needs to be expanded. It needs to be put at the front end, and we need to work with people before they get to jail and prison.
And let me get your response on that. Our programs, do you think they need to be expanded?
I think we do need programs. I think you need to follow the example of Texas, who didn't reduce their crimes to misdemeanors, but they directed more money to treatment. And also the people that have simple possession of drug offenses, they don't go to prison or jail right away. There are several steps in between. There's diversions. It takes about 5 or 6 violations before somebody actually is going to spend any time in custody. And in order for the drug court, the reason drug court's successful is there's consequences.
All right. Well, we do have to end it there. There's a lot more on our website, kpbs.org. Chief Deputy District Attorney Dave Greenberg and retired San Diego Police Chief William Lansdowne, thank you.
Thank you, Peg.
California's punishing drought is a major selling point for supporters of a $7.5 billion water bond on the ballot, but critics say Proposition 1 won't fix the state's ongoing water crisis. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson explains.
The particulates can settle to the bottom.
Cheryl Lester looks down at a cavernous cement trough. The pulleys and chains inside the channel are part of a complicated system that works to filter impurities out of sewage water.
And then you see the troughs where the water is able then to move over into a filtration component. And on this side, you'll see it actually in action, where the water is then going through these little weirs.
The resulting so-called purple water is clean enough to use on lawns, but not clean enough to drink. But building pipes that carry the recycled purple water is expensive, so the facility only sells about half the water it's capable of making. But that could change if there's money to further develop water treatment projects like these. The water bond could fund an expansion of this project in the northern part of the city, which takes recycled water and cleans it enough to become drinking water. Proposition 1 could help because the bond measure sets aside about $2 billion for water treatment projects. There's roughly $2.8 billion for watershed, groundwater, and flood management, and $2.7 billion for new water storage. That is significantly less money than lawmakers initially approved. Bond measures passed by lawmakers in the last 5 years were never considered by voters because supporters were worried they wouldn't pass. California Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins worked with top state officials to pare down this bond.
You know, $7.5 billion doesn't go as far as we would hope it would go for our infrastructure, but is a critical start to doing what we need to do to make sure that we're going to be able to have the water we need throughout the state. So I feel pretty good about it, and I have to say, I think my colleagues do too.
That's because the bond got unanimous support in the state Senate and fell just 2 votes shy of the same in the Assembly. California's ongoing 4-year drought is amplifying the drumbeat for action.
With the worst drought on record, we've seen devastation across California. Our reservoirs way down, land where there used to be water.
California Governor Jerry Brown is using his own re-election funds to persuade voters to back Prop 1. Politicians, business and labor groups, and water agencies like the San Diego County Water Authority populate the list of supporters. The authority's Dennis Cushman says the bond money will develop critical water resources.
There'll be a catalyst to get projects going sooner and faster, and we need those projects going right now to deal not only with our long-term water supply needs as a region here in San Diego, as in California, but also to make our region and state more resilient to droughts.
But there are plenty of people who don't like the bond, people fighting over the future of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Environmentalists and political advocates are speaking out against the measure. They say the bond is full of pork barrel spending that will do little to help ease the current drought. A No on Prop 1 ad shows viewers a barren hillside above a shrinking reservoir. The ad says school funding will suffer while large corporate agricultural interests cash in. Marco Gonzalez works with the Coastal Environmental Rights Foundation, a group opposing the bond. He says too much of the money gets spent up north.
It doesn't give us what we need down here in San Diego at the end of the pipe in terms of long-term water supply benefits.
Gonzalez says Prop 1 money would fund the kinds of projects that have already left California unprepared for the current drought. He says lawmakers need to stop passing bond measures that are designed to win political support, but do little to fix problems.
We need a fix for communities like San Diego, which with big multi-billion-dollar problems dealing with their water infrastructure. What we don't need are these little $5 to $10 million projects that make someone happy but don't give us new water.
If voters decide to back the measure, the state would borrow the $7.5 billion, then repay it out of the general fund over 40 years. The total repayment cost is more than $14 billion. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Voters in the North County will choose who sits on the Tri-City Healthcare District's Board of Directors. 11 folks are vying for 5 seats. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg joins us from our North County Bureau. Kenny, I hear Tri-City Healthcare has been through some tough times.
That's right, Dwayne. Tri-City Medical Center serves about 500,000 people in Carlsbad, Vista, and Oceanside. It's been there for decades, but 3 times in recent years, voters have rejected a bond measure to seismically retrofit the hospital. The board has struggled, too, with a lot of infighting and bad blood. The board fired Tri-City's CEO in 2013, and he's filed a lawsuit.
What's happened since then?
Tri-City has a new top executive, and the hospital actually turned a profit last year. At a recent candidates forum, incumbent board member Ramona Fanilla said the board is doing a good job.
This board majority has saved the hospital financially. We have saved the wellness center from financial problems. We have opened up the medical office building from a tremendously complicated fiscal arrangement.
So, Kenny, what do the challengers have to say about the board?
Well, the challengers say the board is still falling short. For example, candidate Laura Mitchell argues the board has mismanaged the hospital's emergency department.
I do believe that it is understaffed. It also has problems with bed space, as in not enough beds. But it has a ripple effect. It's delaying treatment within the hospital. You've got staff that is stretched to the...
Regardless of who gets elected, Kenny, sounds like Tri-City's board will have some big decisions to make.
Absolutely. Tri-City has to either retrofit its hospital or build a new one by 2030. It also needs to decide whether to sell the hospital, form a partnership with one of the county's larger medical systems, or continue to function independently.
KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. San Diego's 52nd congressional district race is considered one of the most competitive across the country, and as Peggy Pico shows us, it may also be one of the nastiest.
A recent UT 10 News poll shows Democratic incumbent Scott Peters and Republican Carl DeMaio are virtually tied for the 52nd District congressional seat, and they're spending plenty on campaign ads. Mesa College political science professor Carl Luna joins us with analysis of these ads. Carl, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Now, overall, how would you characterize these ads that we're seeing this close to Election Day?
I can't wait for the Christmas ads to replace them. Okay. The ads, they come in 2 basic varieties. The candidate edited narrative usually put out by the campaigns, which has big music like something out of Rocky or West Wing, shows the good side of the candidate, and then the demonization ads about the other guy, how they're the spawn of Satan, and don't vote for them.
Let's take a look at a couple of these ads. First, we're going to look from Scott Peters and then from Carl DeMaio.
Actions speak louder than words. Carl DeMaio made millions from taxpayer-funded government contracts. Yet during the recession, DeMaio refused to reduce his pay and gave his staff raises.
Why did the press call Congressman Scott Peters slippery? Maybe because on the city council, he charged taxpayers for his BMW expenses and helped create the pension crisis that nearly bankrupted San Diego.
Okay, so tell us about, first of all, this "Do the Right Thing" ad with DeMaio, with Peters slamming DeMaio, and then also the slippery slope. What sort of messages are these types of campaign ads sending?
Well, what Scott Peters is trying to show is that even though he's the incumbent, Mr. DeMaio has a history and that he's had his issues with special interests and the rest, that he's not a squeaky clean politician. And in response to ads that have suggested that Scott Peters has had some improprieties without validation in the ads. Meanwhile, that the little race car one and all that I was waiting for Scooby-Doo to come out with an ad like that. It's almost a Hanna-Barbera ad, but it's showing that Scott Peters is undependable. He is a classic incumbent, and you should vote him out.
Well, do these have any basis as far as, is there any backing? Have these been fact-checked?
Well, in that they are words that are found in the dictionary. There's a basis for their use. As far as they apply to the history of the candidates, in both cases you see candidates being slammed for things that happened back in city council days. In the case of Mr. Peters bankrupting San Diego, the voters already ruled on that when they elected him to the Congress. Going after his record in Congress might be more legitimate, but he hasn't had a chance to do much because he's in the minority, so you go after the nearest red meat you've got. In the case of Mr. DeMaio, you want to make him look as bad a politician as he's trying to make you look, otherwise he wins that argument.
So negative campaign ads are nothing new. How effective are they?
Extraordinarily effective. That's why we get so many of them. While people say they don't like them, that doesn't mean they don't pay attention to them. I mean, psychology tells us if you're in a relationship with somebody and you say one negative thing, it takes 10 positives to overcome it. Positives come and go. The negative will define the candidate. He with the least negatives has the better chance to win.
Well, both Peters and DeMaio have accused each other of lying in these ads. Is it legal for a political ad to be untruthful? And if so, what kind of impact does these accusations, oh, you're lying, no, you're lying, does it have on voter turnout?
First Amendment, freedom of speech. Nothing in the Constitution says you have to be polite or you have to be true. Libel laws don't apply here. If it sticks against the barn wall, it can actually work for you. The downside is if you tell so outrageous a lie, it makes you look outrageous, then it can backfire on you. No one has crossed that line yet in this campaign.
The ads that call Peters slippery, as we saw with that, were paid for by a super PAC called the Congressional Leadership Fund. Does relying on outside groups like this for creating or funding these, nasty types of campaign ads, does that sort of absolve the candidate or help them wash their hands if it's received badly?
Yeah, now it's the plausible deniability game. Yeah, the campaigns usually do the more positive ads about their own candidates. They leave the hatchet work to the outside groups to come and do. You could step away from it if it really gets a lot of blowback, but other than that, it's all good because somebody else is holding your candidate down in the mud and you stay looking clean even though you're benefiting from it.
Are we seeing this kind of a negativity as far as ad campaigns in this race, in mailers and or even on those phone calls that we seem to be getting?
Oh, yeah, they double down on the mailers. They'll make accusations even in excess of what you see in the 30-second ads because they have the luxury of big, broad print. Not many people read them, but in the time it takes you to go from your mailbox to the trash with them, some of that messaging absorbs, which is why you get so many of them. The hope is repeat exposure, like with kryptonite, will weaken you.
Remind us of why this 52nd District congressional seat is so contentious and why it's such a hot ticket.
Well, there's only a handful of seats out of 435 seats in the Congress that are up for grabs because of redistricting, gerrymandering, and the fact that for a generation we've moved. Republicans live in Republican neighborhoods, Democrats in Democrat neighborhoods, so the primaries usually pick who the candidate will be for the fall. So this is like the Spanish Civil War for both parties before the 2016 election. They're going to try money, campaigns to see what works here, because it really doesn't matter who wins this race for the balance of power in the House, but this will show you what sort of messaging will work for the 2016 campaigns.
And what about the 52nd district, though? That's not particularly one candidate or the other. It's not particularly skewed in one way or another.
Yeah, what happens in the 52nd, because of the citizens redistricting and the way the things have changed, you've got about roughly a third Republican, Democrat, Independent. It all comes down to turnout. In 2012 or 14, it's an off year. Republicans win. In 2016, in a Democratic year, you could see the seat swap back and forth for the balance of the decade till they redistricted.
All right, political science professor Carl Luna, thanks very much for the update.
Thank you.
Well, with all this political talk, today is the last day to register to vote in the November 4th election. You can do it online right up until 11:59 tonight. The website is sdvote.com. You need to register if you've never done so before or if you moved or changed your name. And you can find all of our election coverage, including the discussions you just heard, plus a link to our online voter guide, all at kpbs.org/election.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, Bob Dole reflects on his life in politics and the current state of the Republican Party. That's Monday on the PBS News Hour.
Temperatures are going to warm up a bit later in the week. Mid-70s tomorrow along the coast, going up to the low 80s by Thursday. Inland Valley temperatures will rise into the upper 80s over the next few days. 70s expected in the mountains with plenty of sunshine, you see. And for the desert, low to mid-90s. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.